All right, everyone. If you're just grabbing some coffee or just mingling a little bit, if I can ask you to find a seat or make yourself comfortable, we're going to get going in just a few seconds here. All right, well, thank you very much, everyone, for coming today. I think it's a really awesome day where our community is coming together around children and youth. And I think there's no better way to do that today than on World Children's Day. And so, yeah, absolutely. So I think it's really awesome that our community is coming together today to get the word out across this community and really across Canada about what we're trying to do in becoming the #1 community for kids in Canada. So I think that's really special, and I'm really glad to be a part of this whole community initiative. My name is Matthew Chandy, and I'm with the region of Waterloo, and I am the one fortunate enough to be leading this Smart City initiative on behalf of the region, all 7 area municipalities, and the community. So I want to personally say thank you for coming together today. It's a full day for us. We have this afternoon, we're a mix of tech and social sector and some youth coming together to talk about what we can do by leveraging technology and data to better support our children and youth in this community. And then later this afternoon, early evening, we're going to be opening this up to the public. I want to say a special acknowledgement out to the Elmira and Cambridge sites. So we are live streaming this to Cambridge and Elmira. So I think it's great that we're having some participation right across the community. And I do want to say thank you to the Idea Exchange. I want to say thank you to Riverside Public School and the folks here at Catalyst 137 for hosting these sessions. So I think it's great that, again, we're seeing that type of community support right across the community. So today we're going to talk to you a little bit about the Smart Cities Challenge that's being run by the Government of Canada. We want to let you know what that's about, what it entails, what they're asking communities like Waterloo Region to do. And then we're going to actually we're going to have a panel this afternoon we're going to have some panelists talking about smart cities and talking a bit about how we can think a little bit outside the box and leveraging smart city solutions, leveraging technology and data to support some of our children and youth. So I'm really excited about the panel that we're going to hear about today. So I guess a great place to start would be what is a smart city, right? Like, I think that's step one. And I think everyone has different definitions about what a smart city is. And so if we take it up to that level where it's something that everyone can connect with or understand, it's an approach that seeks to make communities better by leveraging technology and data. And so that focus, it's really broad, that definition, but that's what the federal government's adopted for the purposes of this Smart Cities Challenge, and it's something that we're adopting for our proposal. So they took that definition in late 2017 and they launched this Smart Cities Challenge, and they put it out to communities across the country. And they asked communities to look at their biggest community challenges and how they could potentially leverage technology and data to overcome those challenges. And so I think it was really smart on their behalf. They were sort of putting this challenge out there and forcing communities to come together, forcing partners to come together and say, okay, we got to work together and figure out how we're going to overcome some of these challenges. And they actually broke it down into 4 different categories. And Waterloo Region, given our population is over 500,000, we fall into the big cities category. And so that means we're competing for a $50 million grant to help us implement some of these solutions. And so, I think when we were looking at this at the start, we were really trying to figure out what are we going to select as our challenge area. And for us, we got together in a room and we started coming up with a list. In phase 1 of this project, we established a community advisory committee with leaders from different organizations across the community. And they directed us to another initiative that's been going on in our community around quality of life, and that's the Wellbeing Waterloo Region Initiative, an initiative that a number of you in this room are a part of. And so they said, you know, they've done all this work through community engagement, leveraging the Canadian Index of Wellbeing, and they've identified some priorities for our community. So start with that. So we did just that. We took 3 areas: healthy children and youth, social inclusion, and affordable housing. We took those 3 areas, and we put a smart cities lens on it, and we went and had some engagement sessions with the community. We had a number of the folks in this room were at some of our initial engagement sessions. We went out to the public and we asked them, you know, which would make the best sense for us here in Waterloo Region to focus on. And so going through that process, we landed on healthy children and youth. And I think one of the things we realized was that whatever solution or whatever focus area that we were going to choose, we're going to build solutions that benefit all 3 because they're all connected. And so we thought that you know, selecting healthy children and youth makes sense. We're a community that looks to the future. We're a community that is thinking about what we can do to you know, support our future populations. So for us, selecting healthy children and youth made a lot of sense. And it was at that time we met our good friends at the Children and Youth Planning Table. And so a lot of those, that organization really started to help us understand a lot of the efforts that were already underway to support our children and youth in this community. And some of the work that they had done along with Wellbeing Waterloo Region, they had actually selected 6 priority areas that they wanted to focus on with our children and youth. So naturally, we adopted those 6 areas, and I think there were 3 very important areas that we could adopt for this challenge. So early childhood development, sense of belonging, mental health, literacy, bullying, and high school graduation rates. So very high-level bucket areas, but we thought, you know what, they're good areas that we can start with, and we can dig into those areas and figure out technology solutions to overcome some of the challenges that we're facing. And so then our next step was, after we had those conversations, we went out and talked to our tech community. We're very fortunate to have the tech sector that we do here in Waterloo Region. There's lots of knowledge here. There's lots of companies that are already providing solutions to children and youth, so we wanted to leverage that. We had a lot of conversations with them, and we came up with an initial list of proposed activities. And so what you'll see on the screen here is a list of activities that we thought is a good starting place. By no means is this exhaustive, and this has obviously evolved since then too. But I think it's really important that we look at some of the things that can better support our youth. When we talk about data, we're talking about what is the data that we're collecting and how do we use that data to better measure our impact on children and youth in this community. And I think that's really important for us to realize and keep track of, and so that we can show and understand where we're moving the needle, where we need to place more efforts. And so, you know, there's a few other things on here that we heard, like connected community spaces. How do we make more spaces outside, not just our schools, but how do we make more spaces like our libraries, like our community centers, even our public parks? How do we make them spaces that support youth development? And how do we leverage technology to make that happen? And it was at this time, too, that we also partnered with UNICEF Canada, and this is a really great addition to this whole proposal for Waterloo Region. We had heard about the work that UNICEF Canada was doing on a new National Child and Youth Wellbeing Index, and we were able to work together and come to a partnership agreement where Waterloo Region, through this proposal, is actually going to develop the measurement framework of how individual communities across the country are going to measure against this national index. And we're going to be the first ones to do that. So a lot of you have seen our challenge statement that says we're going to become a benchmark community. When we talk about becoming a benchmark community, it's because we're going to be the first ones to set targets. And we want other communities across the country to look at Waterloo Region and say, how did they do that? And learn from us about how we built programs around supporting our children and youth. And so here's our challenge statement. Every community across the country had to build a challenge statement out, and it was sort of supposed to be ambitious. It was supposed to challenge us, take us to places that we haven't gone before. And so for us, it's essentially becoming the #1 community for kids in the country. And so in June, of this year, the Prime Minister announced the finalist cities in each category. Over 130 municipalities across the country applied to the Smart Cities Challenge, and 20 got through as finalists, and there was 5 in the big cities category, including us, that got screened through. So we're really excited that to have the Prime Minister announce Waterloo Region as a finalist city and what we're trying to do to support our children and youth and bring technology and our social sector together around children and youth. It was really exciting. But these are the other cities that we're competing against. I thought I'd throw that up there just so that you know. There's the city of Vancouver and Surrey, Edmonton, Quebec, and Montreal. If you notice that there's no one else from Ontario there, so we're the only ones in Ontario that actually made it through. Toronto actually was at, yeah. It was kind of nice 2 weeks ago, the City of Toronto Smart Cities team actually came to a Waterloo Region presentation to learn about what we did in this community. So I'd love to see that whole table sitting there and looking at, taking notes about what we did here. So I think that's an example of what we want to do through this proposal. It's really scaling our solutions to the rest of the country and helping other communities do what we're trying to do here. So we've done some continued work in our focus areas. We're actually now focusing on 4 areas, working with some of our partners and looking at the data. We're actually, if we actually look at how we can address sense of belonging, literacy, mental health, and early childhood development, if we can actually get at some of the root causes there, we know that we can have a positive impact on our high school graduation rates, and we can lower the instances of bullying. So the goal here is to do something different, and that's actually get at some of the root causes of why these are challenge areas for our youth. And based on that, we want to build solutions around those problem statements in order to make a real and long-term difference. And so I think a big part of this project now, phase 2, is actually bringing youth to the center. We actually want to figure out how we talk to youth differently, how we value their voice differently, how we incorporate what they have to say in our decision-making process, in the ideas that we generate, in the solutions that we come up with. So I'm excited that we actually have a Smart Waterloo Region Advisory Committee. They've named themselves the Smart Cities Innovation Council, and their tagline is Youth Unite Here. So I think it's awesome that we have a bunch of youth in our community, and you're going to hear from a couple of them in a couple minutes. But it's great that we have this group of youth that are going to be at the center of this project and going to help us connect with other youth across this community. I will say that we're trying to build solutions for all youth in the community, but we are targeting those underrepresented youth in our community as well. So how do we reach out to those newcomers? How do we reach out to those Indigenous youth? How do we reach out to those LGBTQ2+ youth? How do we connect with those youth and make them feel like they have a part in this process and bring them again to the center of this whole initiative? So we've already started in phase 2. Actually, we're looking at various technology solutions right now, and we're actually prototyping some technology solutions. We've started this process, and we're going to continue to do that over the next few months. We're actually working to March 5th. That's our submission date for the finalist communities. So between now and then, we're trying to prototype some solutions and build out a full plan as to what the next 5 years are going to look like. So we're going to have 5 years to spend that $50 million, and so we're building out a plan right now on how we can build out specific solutions that we're going to implement to move the needle on child and youth well-being. And just to start finishing up here, I'll just point out that one of the things, we have this partnership with UNICEF Canada. They're working away at launching their national index, and we're currently going through a process of looking at all their indicators and prioritizing those indicators and identifying what data is needed to measure against each indicator. So there's a lot of data work that's happening behind the scenes right now with a group of folks that are just identifying how we're going to measure our progress. And so I want to finish up by showing you a short video clip that we had to show to the Smart Cities jury. So while the minister will make the final decision, there is a jury of about 10 to 15 tech and social innovation CEOs from across Canada that are reviewing all of the finalist proposals. And last week, we had to do an interim pitch to them to let them know how the project was coming. So one of the things that we did is we built this little video clip to show how our community is coming together around children and youth. Oh boy, I hope that. So that's a bit about, that's the Smart Cities Challenge. That's what we're working towards. I hope you all got a flavor of what's going on right now. A big thing of what we're trying to do today is this is a launch about bringing more awareness in the community about the Smart Waterloo Region proposal. This is just the start. We're planning a whole series of engagement events over the next few months right across the community. Our stakeholder and community engagement labs will be happening for youth, different stakeholders, the public at large. So it's going to be an exciting process, and today is a great day. We wanted to kick things off by bringing tech and the social sector together to just sort of give that recognition that, again, we're coming together, we're doing what we do best in Waterloo Region, we're coming together to overcome some of the challenges that we face. So, instead of going into any Q's and A's right now, we're going to save the Q's and A's for after our panel. I'm going to call up our panelists to the stage right now, and it's going to be moderated by Kevin Tour. Kevin is the Managing Director at the Open Data Exchange, and he's also a VP of Strategic Projects at Communitech. So I'm going to call Kevin up to the stage, and I guess I'll ask the rest of the panelists to join as well. Thanks. You want to close this?
Yeah, probably better. Unless you want it on the ground.
Let's just, can we leave? Oh. That good?
While we do some housekeeping up here, why don't I kick things off? First of all, it's great to be here to celebrate and be part of such an important initiative. I've had the pleasure to be part of the tech community for over 20 years. I didn't grow up here, but I went to school here. I went away after I graduated. I came back, and what I've always noticed about this region is the appetite and the ability and the interest in collaborating. And of course, being highly engaged in the tech sector for the last 20 years, we certainly see that in spades, but it didn't stop there. There's a tremendous amount of appetite for collaborating, and I think that's exactly what this is all about, and that's what I really liked about the notion of the Smart Cities Challenge. Is it's, first and foremost, it's not about technology. It's about the community, it's about people, it's about solving a challenge, going after improving the quality of life of its inhabitants. And then technology is the enabler that helps all of that. So what we're seeing happening here through the Smart Cities Challenge, and I'll say whether we're successful at getting the 50 million or not, I fully believe this is going to continue on because there's a real appetite for the tech and the social sector to come together and make a difference. And I think that is absolutely fantastic. So you're going to see a bit of evidence of that today with the panelists, and I'll introduce my panelists here momentarily. So here's some evidence. We've got some youth. And yeah, wide range of experience. How do we go with that? But we've got that mix right here. We have a mix on the advisory council. And every time I show up, there's an energy in the room that I can't explain, but I know it's going to propel us forward, and I think we're going to see a little bit about this. And of course, what's important about all of this is the fact, going back to my first comment, this is youth-centered. This is about people. This is specifically about youth and children well-being, and I think that's what's going to make all of this very successful. So what we're going to do is we're going to get engaged with these fine individuals on the stage here, have a little bit of a conversation. I've got a few questions that I want to ask them, and then at the end of that, we'll make sure we give time to all of you to engage, and then we'll see where it goes from there. So on the stage, I'm going to go by the list I have here. So it's Debbie Engel, on the far end, Director of Community Services, Horizon, and co-chair of Children Youth Planning Table, and also member of the Smart Waterloo Region Advisory Committee. We have got Jim Moss on the other end, bookending, as Chief Happiness Officer of Plasticity Labs. And next to him, Curtis McBride, CEO of Maya Vision. And then Doug Akers, who's the Vice President of Customer Experience at Chalk. And then we got Olivier Spizaniak. How was that? Sure. that was not a bad try, but yeah, okay. But we're gonna go, I can call you Ollie, right? Excellent. He's the student body president of Resurrection Catholic Secondary School and our Youth Advisory Committee, Smart Cities Innovation Council. And finally, Bill Lee, next to him, branding communications offers for DEC Ontario, and also member of the Smart Cities Innovation Council. So please join me in welcoming our panelists. So I'm going to start it off by putting Ollie and Bill on the spot, first and foremost. First question, so obviously as an advisory committee, we're very thrilled to have youth at the center of this work and to have had that engagement with the youth so far. And I'm asking both you two, as members of the Smart Cities Innovation Council, what are you most excited about when thinking about the Smart Cities Challenge?
I think firstly, just having the opportunity to sit at the table with so many amazing individuals and really just start that conversation about youth well-being. That in itself, I think, is a really exciting thought. But then kind of thinking about it this way, that a lot of people say youth are the future. But shifting that mentality to the youth are the now. And having us involved in our decision making and having us involved in the decisions that affect us. So I think that is really exciting.
Yeah, much like Olivier said, a lot of people say that youth is the future of our community, but the reality is youth are in the community now, and it's important that we feel valued and feel as if we are also members of this community. And what I'm so excited to be a part of this Smart Cities Region Waterloo is that we're giving youth the opportunity to have their voice heard in some of the important decisions regarding our future.
Fantastic. And so let's talk a little bit more about diversity and inclusion. Like what are the things that we need to take in mind, or how do we engage and make sure that we have good representation of youth in the Waterloo region?
So obviously, one of the exciting things about being a part of the Innovation Council is the fact that we have so many different perspectives coming to meet. And when we share those perspectives, that's really when innovation or ideas are made. And obviously, in the next step of it, we're going to be able to implement those ideas. But right now, just hearing those new perspectives from people who may not typically raise their hand, people who come from disenfranchised households, that in itself is also really exciting. And trying to engage the community on a regional scale is also something that's really exciting. So.
For sure. Diversity is incredibly important, and the more perspectives you can get about a decision, the more relevant that decision will be. And it's important that with youth, we're not just going after those youth that are willing to help, but those youth that are part of the community but don't necessarily want to speak up or are inspired to speak up. I know, coming from my past and my experience, I wasn't always the student that wanted to put up their hand or to get involved, but knowing what impact my voice can have on the community, I think is really important. And that's what we're trying to do, is to inspire and nurture the youth of our community to get involved, even those that typically wouldn't.
Well, even in the video I just saw there, what I sensed there, that there is a real energy with youth. Is that your sense that, you know, youth in general and those that you're speaking with really want to be a part of this and really think it's the right thing to do?
So a lot of youth, especially those that, sit at the back of the classroom, they don't go to clubs, and organically, a lot of the youth that come to events are youth that want to get involved. But, we're working with schools, guidance counselors, teachers to help pick out those students that are very much a part of this community, and inviting them to these different events so that we can hear their voice. And it's really important that we hear their voice and let them know that they have civic significance and they can be part of this community and make those decisions with us.
Like when I look at my school community and try to put them into demographics when I was running for my campaign, I kind of thought of it like this. So there's obviously the community as a whole, and that's the full circle, and then there's circles within that circle. So whether that be the more academically proficient kids, the kids who kind of go more towards sports, people who are more kind of club-based, but then there's that kind of demographic that doesn't really fit in anywhere. And it's those people exactly that we're trying to target with this project. And I think when we can engage those students, that's when you kind of get that full sense of community that we're really going for here.
Absolutely. So great opportunity for broad spectrum engagement with this. Excellent. So, okay, so now let's switch slightly over to the technical part of the smart cities. And I think when we think of smart cities, we often think of the sensors, the widgets, the networks, the technology that goes behind building that solutions and the infrastructure. I'm going to start with you, Curtis. Like, how should we be thinking about smart cities, and how can we leverage the technology enabled solutions to help with non-traditional smart city challenges like children and youth?
It's a really broad, really broad question.
You're welcome.
Yeah. So maybe I'll start with like, what is a smart city? People talk about smart city all the time, and I think the implication was before smart cities, we were all dumb cities. But if you asked 100 different people or 100 different companies what's a smart city, I think you get 100 different answers. So one of the things that we think a lot about is sort of trying to look at the internet as an analogy for where we are in the evolution of the smart city. How many people remember, this is kind of speaking about youth, how many people remember the discs that used to come in the mail from America Online? Okay, yeah. So for those of you who are young and don't remember America Online, before the internet, there was this thing called America Online where you would essentially log into the internet. And at the time, this was like a wondrous thing, right? There was curated content. You could chat with people all over the world. And for all the young people in the room, they're like, the internet's always been here. What are you talking about? But there was a time before the internet. And at the time, the America Online was like this mind-blowing experience. But then the internet came along, and we now think of America Online as like the butt of jokes, right? It was like this brief moment in time where the internet hadn't quite manifested in its sort of full grandeur. So I think that we're in the AOL moment of the smart city, where you have big companies like IBM, like Cisco, that have these slides where they sort of show all of the things that go on in a city: transportation, health, safety, and then their logos in the middle. And when you ask them what is that, like what is going on in there, they can't really tell you. And so all of this to me is pointing to the internet became the internet because of standardized approaches to data exchange. So I promise it's the only technical thing I'll say today, but on the internet we have this protocol called TCP/IP, or another one called HTTP, which allows basically the exchange of information. So when you buy something on Amazon, you're actually using those protocols to talk to the website. The smart city, or the city as I like to call it, doesn't have a protocol yet, doesn't have a way for information to be exchanged. And I think the focus of this Smart City Challenge, which is kids and their experience in our cities, is sort of what I would, as a technologist, what I would think about it as like the application layer, right? Where it's a solution to a problem. But as technologists, we often try to think about the problem more deeply. And what I hope comes out of this, and I hope Waterloo wins, but whoever wins, I hope as a country, we think a lot about what that protocol layer could look like, so that the data that we uncover about what's going on, whether it's with our kids or with our transportation networks or environment, that data can be accessible to in other applications, to other groups that might be able to use that information to draw different insights than the ones that was initially collected for. So how's that for a broad answer?
Not bad. Yeah. That's as broad as the question was. So, so a key element that came out of what I heard you say was the data piece, right? So, and I assume it goes along with that. Privacy and security is a big element. How can you speak to that a little bit on how we should be approaching the privacy and security
Yep.
when it comes to engaging youth?
We all know each other. We're all from the same town, so yeah. So I think of privacy kind of like wearing pants. It's really important.
It's a good thing to do.
Yeah, you
Okay.
should do it every day.
And check regularly.
Yeah. So I think privacy to me is like a price of entry, right? Like if you're building a digital mirror world, which is kind of like as scary as that might sound, that is where we're heading, right? Where everything will be measured and digitized and available as a platform that you can talk to it with software. Privacy has to be paramount, but it shouldn't be where the conversation ends. Because the opportunity, anything you measure will improve, and we've never really been able to measure our cities in the way that we're going to be about to in the next 10 years. So I think we have to wear pants. But what you do when you wear pants and you go out in the world is what we should be focusing on. If you guys can follow. the analogy.
Pants are good.
Table stakes. For a healthy community.
All right, I'm not sure how to follow that one up, but anyways, I'm not gonna make it my problem. I'm gonna make it Doug's problem. And Doug, I mean, you're obviously very engaged in education. Where do you see technology fitting into creating, applications and value around youth and children wellness?
I think we have to remember always, and Matthew said it, and you said it, Kevin, when you started off, that these are human problems we're trying to solve, and technology is a tool. And we should be using that tool with all its discs and all its pants, which I love, to solve the actual problems of children and youth that we have. And losing sight of the actors involved will cause us to build something that may not match the problems that we're actually trying to solve. We talk about information, we talk about accessibility, we talk about privacy, we talk about platforms, we talk about data. Those are all aspects that can lead to a solution, but they're not solutions in and of themselves. So when I think about smart cities, I love the region's bid because it's focusing on the human aspect. It's focusing on empowering people to make those decisions, to make those solutions for themselves, using technology and data as tools to do so. It's teaching them to fish instead of giving them fish. I don't want to give the region fish. I want to give the region the ability to fish for themselves, to provide food for themselves, to grow up and provide food for their children. I look at education platforms, whether it's something like Chalk or D2L or others in the region that supply as means to deliver that stuff. And it's not as broad as education platforms. It can be as small and as niche as what the Shore Center did for women and girls experiencing pregnancy, right? Give them the tools to find information to make their lives and make informed choices for them better. Okay? We don't have to think about the grandiose problems to solve. We can also think about the little ones. Use the data we have, use the tools we have, use the infrastructure that the community can put together, but focus on the humans and the relationships between those humans and their environment to make that better.
Absolutely. Fantastic. So we've touched upon the data piece, and I think we can all agree that good data, not just data, but good data is a key element of a good smart cities strategy and initiative. So Jim, over to you. When we think about our Smart City Waterloo Region proposal, it focuses on mental health, early childhood development, literacy, and sense of belonging. How do you see data being used to improve the overall well-being of children and youth?
So great question. How do we use the data we already have? And then how do we also think about what other data can we bring to the market? We think the way that we use data to help organizations or education environments improve the well-being of their people, whether they be children or youth or adults, is to identify strengths and opportunities and whether the common language exists to be successful. And so the same way that the internet needed a common language so that you could talk, we find that things like language like hope and optimism fundamentally being used connects people in healthier ways and generates healthy outcomes. So we want to be able to identify the current and changing state of well-being, not just from an ingredient standpoint, but as we start to create positive impact and interventions, which ones are working. And so the humility to say, here is an intervention, or here is an action that we're going to take in our community, and we're willing to shut that down if it's not working, or change it, or move our chips to the things that are having the biggest impact. And good organizations are doing that all the time. And so I think to get a community to think that way, let's measure all the things that we're doing to the extent that we can, and be willing to improve them for their purpose, and detach our ego from what gets done or how we do things. And I think data is never the whole story, but it brings a new voice to all of our discussions to help improve our intuitions and our opinions, and take us towards more meaningful real-life conversations and interactions about what to do next. So we're not going to solve this in year one. If this was an easy thing to do, it would have been done already. And so data should help us continue to come back to the table and talk about what's been working and what's changing, and help us identify what other data we need. Like, where do we have a blind spot where we could bring data in one form or another. But then the humility to engage with those insights in honest ways that stay focused on the goal.
So happiness can be measured?
Happiness can be measured and predicted.
Very good. And when you're talking about, because I think there was an interesting point about the fact that we have a wealth of data available now through a variety of different institutions, et cetera, but it may not be enough.
Right.
So any idea on whose role that will be, or really come down to what the application is, or is it squarely on the shoulders of government?
I think government has a big part to play. I think private industry, finding solutions already and identifying what's there, they kind of have an equal spot at the table. Part of the problem, part of the difficulty that we have now is as much data that we have, it's not easily useful. And so, pardon the analogy, but I think about databases as kind of a cistern or a septic tank, and they're full of crap unless you go in and find the gold. And so part of it is, how do maybe we need less but better data. And then, do we need everything? Well, generally we would like to see everything to identify what might be valuable. But how do we support going out and getting the most meaningful things? And so everything about what we do is to try and identify predictive models. So instead of sending so many ambulances out into the world, how do we stop people needing to call an ambulance? And so how do we find those really highly predictive trends so that we know where to invest earlier to get the outcome that we want, instead of where should we send all the ambulances, right? What do we need to make healthier decisions that lead to less ambulance calls? And so I think the government needs to be ready to support us finding those missing data points, and support the development of infrastructure to get those when we've proven that we've got meaningful ways to put that data into effective use.
Okay. So again, maybe government, but it's a shared responsibility.
It's a shared
to make sure we do
responsibility.
this.
How many people in here are parents? How many people, your children are raised by a village? It's a shared responsibility. And so every part of this needs to be a shared responsibility. When you pass your child off to the teacher at school, or to the coach, or to the art teacher, or to the neighbor down the road who covered you because you're late from work, we need to share that responsibility. And so I think all of those are supported by government, private industry, and then personal responsibility. And so we need all of those voices to be part of it.
Okay. Excellent.
But the $50 million would be great coming from the government. How many people have $50 million?
We're trying.
Yeah,
We're trying.
right.
Okay. So let's get back to youth again. And Debbie, I'm looking at you specifically. As the service provider and the chair of the Children and Youth Planning Table, how do you see the Smart Cities Challenge impacting your work?
So I think the social service sector's done a great job over the last few years of coming together to create a system that really focuses on children and youth, and the Children and Youth Planning Table is a good example. We have 70 plus agencies that come together and their sole focus is on how to support children and youth in our community, and really focusing and making sure that all voices, so the youth that are on the fringe are being represented. Where we're challenged is, as good as we're doing, we haven't been able to get the tech sector or the business sector to the table, or really have true authentic voice of youth at the center of what we're doing. We're planning for them, but we haven't actually had them, for the most part, at the table. Smart Cities has changed that. It's brought all of the partners together, all the sectors together, and really challenged us to have innovative conversations, to really have out-of-the-box thinking. When I sit up here and listen to these guys talk, I'm like, that is so not my world. But it is a world that we need, where we have a sector that is, we have lots of great data, but it's not data we all have access to. We have data that could inform and help identify trends for us that would be able to do. Partnerships are going to really help us here. So being able to partner with UNICEF and have data that's going to be real-time data to tell us how our children and youth are doing in our community is going to be huge. It's going to inform our planning from an organization like Horizon, where we're dealing with mental health, and families that are struggling. It will help us to know what are the really meaningful things that we can do. Or being able to have technology that looking at leveraging the ability to bring technology into getting the right data, sharing data, finding ways to not get caught up in the privacy or who owns the data. What's right for our community? What's right to inform how we can support children and youth? The other place I think is really important is children and youth are at the center. So Smart Cities has brought children and youth to the conversation in the now. It's not, they are our future. They have a voice now. Listening to these two young gentlemen, they are smart guys who have an idea of what they need and how to move forward. And so we need their voice at the table. And what it's done with the help of organizations like Overlap is it's changed how we're going to work with children and youth. So no matter what, children and youth are at their center. We're going to have them be at the table for planning at the early stages. We're not going to do it without them. Their voice is going to be there. It's going to be part of what we do, and it's going to inform and have a much bigger weight on what happens in their community. So it's going to, regardless of what happens, it's going to transform how we work.
And again, back to your point, so you do see this as a bit of an inflection point in terms of our ability, especially engaging the tech sector with the social sector?
I do. I think that you can't unknow what you know. And so having conversations with the tech sector and the business sector and talking about our graduation rates or talking about the number of children and youth who are struggling with mental health, we're now talking about using their knowledge and their expertise and their strengths to help in places that social service agencies just don't have the same capacity. So the conversations are changing, and how we are going to leverage that is going to look different.
Excellent. So it's bright skies ahead.
I'm optimistic.
We have to be optimistic. So, okay, so that's great. So this is, I'm going to ask you all collectively a next question, and then we're going to open up to the audience for their questions. But I'd like to ask you what opportunities or impacts that you see coming out of this project and what it means for tech sector, social service sector, community as a whole, and youth. And I'm going to look to Ollie and Bill to kick us off with that. Didn't see that one coming, did you?
Yeah. So I think that obviously how I was talking about different perspectives meeting, I think that's how true innovation is made, when two perspectives meet. So with a project like this, where we have tech perspectives, social worker perspectives, and the perspectives of the youth, it's kind of difficult to gauge what the impact will be. But obviously, considering the scale, it can be region-wide, hopefully nationwide, and who knows, maybe we're going to be affecting youth around the globe. So.
Okay. Fantastic.
I'm definitely hoping that one day youth will be able to as a kid, right? When I go out and I introduce myself, and people see me as a kid, and people are like, oh, he's just a teenager. What does he really know, right? Or if I'm ever at a big event, and often even at work, I have to train people who are older than me, and that respect because of my age isn't necessarily always there, and I'm hoping. And I'm optimistic that through smart cities, people will realize how important youth are and how significant our voice can be and how transformative our opinions can be. And I am hoping that the opportunity arises and continues to arise for youth to sit there at the table, much like it is right now, for us to share our voices and make our opinions be heard.
Excellent. Well stated. Curtis?
To be honest, I think the biggest benefit, and I'll share, in the United States, the U.S. Department of Transportation ran their Smart City Challenge, so it was transportation themed. There were 75 cities that applied, and they started theirs, I guess, about a year and a half before the Canadian one started. So you can use them as a straw model for how this plays out. But I actually think that the process that we're going through is actually way more valuable than the $50 million. Don't get me wrong. We want the $50 million, although we know that Jim has gold in his septic tank. If it doesn't happen, that's your backup plan. But no, I think the process of kind of getting us to all come together, like I can't think of a time where tech people and other, like we tend to like live in our little dark silos writing code, right? Like I can't think of a time where we've been on a panel talking to people who aren't tech people about literally. So I think that the process we're going through and the conversation that gets started, if we use the U.S. as a proxy for what will happen here, there'll be one winner, but all of the cities will not stop having those conversations. The connections that are building, the new ways of thinking about how we involve children in policy development, those will continue. And I think that's going to be, when we look back, that'll probably be the biggest thing that comes out of this.
Excellent. Debbie?
I think I can reiterate exactly what what Curtis is saying. I think it really is about the fact that we've started the conversations and that we're building relationships that we didn't have before. People are in the same room talking about children and youth and bringing different perspectives and having youth as part of the conversation. And so we're setting a new way of doing business and working in our community. And so I think it'll continue. I agree, $50 million would be great, but I think it's important to continue and make a commitment to children and youth and their well-being, and this is just going to further that.
Jim?
Yeah, I would definitely support that, and from the kind of the previous history, oftentimes even some of these cities raise 5 times as much money through private channels because they get so emotionally committed. A couple of things, I think. One of the things that we're seeing come together is that when we all get in a room, we've got everything we need. But when we're all in our little companies or our little non-for-profits or even our own individual high school, we've got some strengths and we've got some weaknesses, and we're trying to make do with what we can with that small group. But when we all come together, and you can feel the efficiency of Curtis using his expertise at its best, and not having to waste his time on the things that maybe aren't his strength, because somebody else does hold that strength. And so the collective capacity of a region, I think we're going to see ourselves unlock that. The other thing I would say is that we're going to start to use our powers for good. So this region has built a lot of things over a lot of years. Some of them super cool and awesome. Some of them kind of like, oh, that's great that we did that, but we raised $100 million to do it. I think that when we come together around something so important and we bring our ability to raise money, our ability to attract talent, our ability to raise incredible young people and then get out of their way so they can be incredible. When we bring all those things together, I think we're going to stand back and really look and be like, wow, how do we teach other regions to do that? But it will be the collective outcome of seeing everybody put their correct oar in the water and row in the same direction. I think that's what's going to blow people away.
Okay. Doug, bring it home.
The beauty of going last is you get to reiterate everything everybody else already said. The connection between the three groups that we've got represented here, I think, is immensely important. What I've learned through working with Matthew and Jill and others in this program is that the solutions are not always wide and overbearing. Sometimes they're very, very small and they're very, very easy to achieve. It's just one group or the other hasn't seen that solution yet. I know as part of the technology sector, I myself jump into solution mode right away. This is how I could solve this problem. And sometimes I forget to ask, is this really your problem? Just ask my wife. Engaging the different parties here, the youth, the social service, and the builders, the technology sector, gives us that opportunity to really understand the problem. And as I said earlier, the human side of that problem and the solutions that can really make a difference. So let's together, collectively, come up with those solutions, and let's make sure those solutions are targeted at the right place. And it's probably not the place we originally thought it was. It's probably something much smaller, much easier to grasp, and much easier to attain in a sustainable way.
Excellent. So obviously some common themes across the table here. So I think that means we're all pulling in the rope in the right direction. So now we're going to turn it over to you. Do we have any questions from the audience for our panelists? Don't be shy. Please.
So I'm with Owl Child Care Services, and I think it's fantastic that we have all these sectors together. We're so happy to be part of the Children's Planning Table and to support this project. But I wonder, how do we bring in the voice of the younger youth? So I'm thinking of sort of those 6 to 12-year-olds or even 6 to 14-year-olds. How do we include them? Because we know that early intervention is so important. So how do we include the younger children, thinking of sort of those 6 to 12-year-olds, knowing that early intervention is so important? How do we make sure they're included in this project?
Can I take that?
Please.
That's actually some of what we do. So Plasticity Labs, we're a happiness company. We look at psychological skills that predict people handling life's difficulties and extracting more joy from life. Our youth work is called the Hero Generation. And specifically, we work with JK to grade 8 right now, developing traits like hope and optimism and empathy and mindfulness. When we do that, we don't do it in the form of a curriculum. We do it through educating and then empowering. And so the children themselves and their teachers figure out how they're going to practice gratitude. And so it's a creative, it's kind of like we're putting the ingredients in and then seeing what the children with some adult guidance come up with. And it didn't take long to know that that was the right thing to do, because what they do is incredible. Now, given their age, I think we have to stand back and say, what are the patterns? You know, how can we repeat that? And so we steer it with a framework. And then being a data company, we ask the children and the adults what they're seeing and what those effects are. And so knowing what to ask and what to look for needs to be the expertise of the framework. But then it's a little bit like, don't give kids a box of Lego necessarily that says it has to be a spaceship. Give them a box of Lego and then get out of the way and watch, but watch. And so giving them the opportunity and then understanding how to identify what's important about what they do with it is, in our opinion, the best way to kind of grab their voice, but it's their voice in action. And then help mature them through the process of, you know, to your point, did you say this? And have them echo it back to you and make sure we're capturing what they mean, not just what they said. And then evolving that. I think what you raised as a point is really, really important, because how can they co-create as early as junior kindergarten or preschool? And they can. And so we've got to be less prescriptive and more suggestive, right? Opportunistic, where we give them the opportunity to create and then help capture that and scale it.
Excellent. Other questions? I saw a hand.
Nice.
I was wondering how technology can be used to model youth behavior, to get a sense of community and inclusive feeling so that you target good behavior in youth?
I think that's a technology company question. Who models human behavior? That'd be you, Jim.
That is super difficult. So what I would say is we probably know more than we've ever known about how to create behavior. Unfortunately, it has predominantly come from a capitalist standpoint. So things like Pokemon Go, Facebook, Snapchat, those are the Fortnite, which I might be guilty of being addicted to myself at times. I'm still young, under the beard. They've identified ways to deeply engage and connect children. Only they're doing it to make money. And so when I say using our powers for good, we need to extract, how do we make engaging, unbelievable technology that doesn't build the behavior that's good for a company, builds the behaviors that are good for children to become flourishing adults. So I think there's a big lesson to go and look at what are existing technologies using to engage children, and then remember that it's going to change in a year, and a year, and a year. And so part of this, I think, is about building what's called an invisible UI. So how do we get technology, how do we make a park that has some technology in it, but they don't really notice it, right? And how do we embed technology in different ways that can evolve without being outdated before it's even been adopted? So a little bit of finding out what's already working, using a ton of the psychology that we understand and using it for good, but then making sure that we don't commit too heavily to something that's likely to expire. Like if we asked you guys some of the technology that you used over the last 5 or 6 years, it's changed a lot, I'm guessing. And so if we were building for what they used 5 years ago, it'd be too late. And so it doesn't get a chance to scale nationally because they're on to the next thing. And so that really is one of, when we talk about technology as the behavioral change agent, it's very difficult to estimate correctly what to invest in. But we need to understand it fundamentally and make it malleable and able to evolve very quickly to whatever is the most recent interface that the kids are using. Does that answer the question? Part of the question?
You got me convinced. Other questions?
Hi, I was just wondering about some of the strategies to help involve some of our more difficult to reach youth. I think sometimes they have lots of information to share with us that we think, again, we know the answers to. But I know asking youth who might be out on the streets or not connected with an agency per se on an ongoing basis, asking them to attend to an event is not a great way to engage them. And so I was wondering if there's any discussions about kind of road shows or roadshow engagements at the different social agencies in terms of like Safe Haven or One Roof, something like that.
Yeah, so a big part of what we're trying to do is actually go out into the community. Today is really our launch, but when I talked about earlier a series of engagement sessions, we want to go out into the neighborhoods. We want to work with our neighborhood associations. We want to work with those members of the CYPT, for example, here that deal with some of those underrepresented youth. I think what we're trying to do is something new. We're trying to change the way we talk to youth. And again, as I said earlier in my presentation, while the solutions are meant for all youth, we're trying to focus on those underrepresented youth. So we're looking at new strategies. And part of this process over the next few months is talking to the youth and finding new ways to connect with them and go to them instead of expect them to come to us. So we're hoping actually to build a new framework around engagement with youth in our community. That's something we're going to present to the federal government as part of our proposal. And part of that will include a new strategy on how we connect with some of those underrepresented youth.
Deb, do you have a perspective you'd like to share?
I think Matthew's covered most of it. I think what it is being able to partner. So I agree with you that we need to make sure that we have youth who are homeless, who are living with addictions, the youth that we don't see and have conversations the same way. And so I think there are conversations with agencies who are able to support that and have staff that are out on the streets having youth interviewers who are going out and having conversations. But it's important that the social service agencies and the people who are in the communities remind and keep that in the forefront of who are the youth we're not hearing from. And so it's a place that we're continuing, and it is a question that continues to be asked.
I just wondered if Bill or Ollie has a perspective on that.
So I know with kind of engaging people who come from those disenfranchised households, it becomes really, really difficult because obviously they don't want to be involved. But something that kind of at our school, at least, we're trying to implement, or something that I've noticed that works is, let's say we're having a coffee house event. Instead of just putting out a banner or something, you go to your personal friends and ask them, hey, it would really mean a lot to me if you came. Establishing that personal connection and that care, I think, is ultimately what gets people engaged. And yeah.
Makes sense. Okay, we got time for one more question, I think. So we've got the gentleman back here.
So as I was looking at the goals for this Smart City Waterloo Region initiative, I see some really, really ambitious problems to try and tackle in terms of the scope of some of these things that we're trying to solve. When I think about something like sense of belonging or sense of well-being, there are so many things that go into that. Has the committee started to think about the sort of scope of solutions that are being considered, or is that part of something that we're waiting for further consultation before we start talking about what might this look like beyond how do we cultivate sense of belonging?
Matthew?
Yeah, so I'll comment on that. So, yeah, one of the things is, I mentioned in my presentation, our proposal is due in March. We're not going to have the majority of this sorted out by March. It's a plan about what our community is going to do in the future to figure out a lot of these solutions. What we're doing now is building that framework to start building those solutions. And some of the things, I mentioned prototyping some solutions. We've been going through an exercise right now to identify the root causes, because we know that if we want to make meaningful change, those are broad bucket areas. So let's get into each one of them, let's dig into them. Let's identify the root causes, and then from that, we're actually building problem statements that our community and our tech sector can respond to and build solutions around. And so we're going to run that whole process and over the implementation period. So we're going to start with a few solutions in each focus area, and then over the implementation period, build it out and continue to do research, continue to learn, continue to identify what are some of the root causes. A lot of this is also going to be, we're going to try solutions out. They may not work, so we may have to adjust. And so it's really, at this point, what's the framework about what we're going to do over the next 5 years and beyond to start building some of these solutions. But right now, we're just trying to do the starting point and build a long-term plan for what Waterloo Region is going to look like and how we're going to do it.
Okay, awesome. So we do have, I've been told, one more question, and we have, I got mixed messages.
I just want to make a comment. It's not a question in itself. So I am really, really happy to hear from youth and all the respectable panel here. So I'm here today because of my daughter. She became part of the advisory committee, and she talked so nicely about this committee and this work that I really became curious to become part of this. And she talked about Matthew. I never met Matthew. She talked about the whole team. And she brought so much energy in our house that I said to myself that, well, being a social worker, I never saw this much in the house, that what she's saying, something is changing. So it brought so much hope. And I'm really hopeful because this youth, the gentlemen sitting here, they are our future. Our community's future lies in their hands. And if we empower them, if we support them, I think I can tell for sure we don't have to worry about 50 million. We have our future ahead of us. Thank you so much.
Well, I'm not even going to try to follow that one. So Absolutely. It's a perfect way to end this panel. So please join me in thanking our panelists. And I understand Patrick from Overlap will be taking over next.
Thanks, Kevin. All right, so while people shuffle and you're kind of soaking up all that information, that was, a pretty energetic way to end things off. So thank you for that last comment. I just want to say a couple things while we kind of transition into what we're asking everybody to do here today. So again, I'm Patrick from a company called Overlap. Lots of familiar faces in the room from various things that we've done. I'm stepping aside from that. I'm part of this Smart Waterloo Region team today. And we are so jazzed and excited to be here. This work is right in our wheelhouse, and it's really energetic and exciting. And we're trying to build that because we recognize that as a Smart Waterloo Region team, and maybe even sprinkled and peppered throughout here, many of you will have heard of this initiative before, but largely in our community, no one knows this is happening. So we want to build that up. We want to have more conversations. The word conversation was mentioned I don't know how many times on that panel and through various feedback and comments that were given. So really, thank you for being here and continuing that, and that's what we want you to now go out and do here and beyond. There's a mixture of people from tech and social sector and youth and all more than I don't know about here today. But we're hoping that with this cross-pollination, we can continue these conversations and bubble up initiatives that we don't know are happening in and around our region on this topic of including child and youth well-being. There's a lot of activity going on. We all have taken a break from our day jobs, or maybe somehow you've said that this is part of your day job so you can scoot away from the office, and that's great. We're glad you're here. We all go back to jobs and do this work in various ways that can connect us and get us here today. So we're hoping that you'll continue those. So after you leave. So a couple of things before I kind of let you loose. If you haven't already, soak up the panels and the posters that are on the easel boards to my right, and there's still coffee and food and snacks over there, so do that as well. It really kind of paints a story of the Smart Cities Challenge. It builds off of what Matthew said, where the Smart Waterloo Region team has come to up until this point, and so soak up that content and get a sense of the work done up until now. Again, building off of what Matthew and many on the panel said, this is really about awareness building. So we want not only this room and the Elmira and Cambridge locations that are taking part in launch events, but we want the whole region buzzing about this. It's important work. It's really exciting to be a part of, and we hope that you all feel that and continue to pass that excitement and inspire that excitement in others around the region. So. We hope you leave today with a couple lasting thoughts. We want you to carry that enthusiasm, but also kind of feel like this sense of need. It's kind of shocking reading some of these stats about our region and child well-being, and that we're not doing so great in some areas, and so we want to do something about that. Even in the areas where we're maybe doing better than neighboring regions or neighboring provinces, we can do better. We can make those numbers 0 or 100% when those numbers make sense. But we can all, through this collective effort, all these minds around the table or in this room, in this region, we can help to do better. So we hope that there's kind of a collective sense of excitement and enthusiasm and shock, and let's get going. And to do that, really, there's two things that we're doing today. So as a Smart Waterloo Region team, we've made these conversational toolkits. It's really a series of prompts. We're hoping that you'll have conversations and with new friends and new minds here today. There's stacks of them over by the panels. There's also some stacks. We've kind of flipped over the registration area, so you can pick them up on your way out. But we're really hoping that you'll have conversations with new friends that are here today, and then take a couple extras. We got lots. Think of who you would give this to and continue to start the conversation. We want the whole region buzzing about making this the best community for kids and youth, okay? While you're having the conversations here today, so it's kind of it's an open block of time from now till 4 o'clock. So have a couple conversations. If you got a jet, take some toolkits when you go. But we're giving you a box of Lego. We're not telling you what to make with it, okay? To use that analogy. While those conversations are happening, we've got some youth here today, and they're kind of playing a role of youth reporters. So don't be surprised if while you're having a conversation, a couple people come up to you and ask you what you're chatting about and what's really stood out to you about your conversations or is particularly insightful, or did you have an aha moment talking with someone that you didn't expect to bump into here today? And we'll jot those things down on Post-it notes or ask you to do so. There's some social media takeover stuff going on with the Smart Waterloo Region account, so we might ask you if we can put a tweet up or a photo or something like that on Instagram or Twitter. But again, lots of conversation. So please dive in. Also, you can flag down one of us and we can hand out some more of these kits, but have lots of conversation and continue to help us build this momentum. Thanks for being here, everybody. Have at it.